I mean, what do you think? You think they stand a chance? Well, you're on their side, aren't you? Who are you betting on,
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest one of all?
Look at these lies.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
Even if one of them survives.
The only way to stop him is to make another movie.
Welcome to the Celluloid Mirror, a film discussion podcast presented by 4 Mile Circus, a media services company based in Brooklyn that produces original films, podcasts, and more. On each episode of the Celluloid Mirror, we pair 2 very different films to see what they reflect about each other and the audience watching. I am one of your hosts, and I am Nicole Solomon.
And I am the other host, Sean Mannion. And today we have a guest to join us, a guest joining us. There's a way to phrase that, right? Che Broadnax is a Brooklyn-based filmmaking multi-tool. He has been found behind the lens of indie features in the edit suite for major networks and hunched over the drafting table creating sequential art. Recently, he photographed IFP Films' sci-fi horror comedy Welcome to Willits, singer-songwriter Aria J's Growth, and MTV's Climate Change Christmas. His directorial debut, Civil Warriors, won Best Narrative Feature at the 2016 Long Beach Indie International Film Festival. In another life, Che was known as Rev 1, Last Revolutionary MC, and released 2 politically charged hip-hop albums. He's currently working on 2 exciting science fiction projects, including one with Nicole, that they hope to share with everyone soon. Welcome to the Celluloid Mirror, Che.
Thank you. It feels great to be here, especially after hearing a bio about myself that, to be clear, I wrote, but I'm still pretty impressed, actually.
It's a good bio. That's some solid bioing right there. That's easily in the top 2 bios that we've had for guests on the show so far.
Wow.
I mean, it's up there.
Yeah.
It's up there.
I feel honored. And
it is a good bio.
That I wrote such a good bio for myself. Wow. No, but seriously, let's be real. What do we call it? I'm sorry. This cat he doesn't want to be in the room, if you can believe that. Kit Kat, come here, brother.
A cat changing their mind?
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like cats at all.
Especially when Adora is involved. That's ridiculous. When Adora's involved, cats changing their mind. I hope y'all heard what I just did out there, people.
Adora.
Hey, Adora. So, wait, anyways, no, the point being, imposter syndrome is real, and sometimes when other people tell you what you've done, you're like, oh, dip. I guess that's not so shabby. So, yeah.
It's not at all. When you sent me stuff, I was like, look at this. Che's impressive. Are we good enough to have him on our podcast?
It's too late. We already got him.
Fancy things?
Listen, anyone who is willing to listen to me talk about a movie is good enough to have me on their podcast. 2 movies is like a dream come true.
Which reminds me, what are we talking about, Nicole?
Well, for today's episode, we have a double feature, for a change, of Sorry to Bother You and The Big Boss. First, we are going to give a quick synopsis of each film, and then we're going to outline the primary connections that we see between them. We'll share our own reactions, and then we're going to dive into some analysis of some of these shared themes. So to kick us off, Che, would you like to tell the audience listening what happens in either or both of these films?
I'd love to.
Excellent. It would have been awkward otherwise.
The Big Boss begins with Bruce Lee's character, Cheng, traveling with his uncle to a new village He's going to get a job. He's going to stay with cousins. Uncle is like, do not make waves. You just try to get a job. Don't get into any fights. Incidentally, again, Bruce Lee, just spoiler alert, he's going to get into some fights. Dramatic tension immediately set up. Don't get into fights, Bruce Lee. He gets a job. There's this ice factory. They're making ice. They're sending it out there. You know, like everybody in the village works there. Things are a little hairy at the factory. The overseers, what do you call those? Foremen. The foremen at the factory are like a little rugged. You know, they're not really interested in people having complaints about like workplace safety or hours or anything like that. My man Cheng, he meets up with, you know, like his other cousin, Xu Sheng, in town, like when toughs, thugs, whatever those types are around, Xu Sheng is ready to give him what for. Before long, things start getting a little weird at the factory. Two of the homies accidentally find some heroin, and then, you know, the manager of the factory calls him in, says like, yo, what's the deal? I've decided to let you in on this thing. Like, there's a lot of money to be made, blah, blah, blah. These guys are just simple, hardworking country folk. They just want to make an honest living, you know, support their family. They're not interested in like getting ahead and ambition and drug dealing. So they kind of, you know, they politely decline the manager's offer. Bam! The manager gets some thugs to get these guys, and they kill them. The next day, Xu Sheng's like, yo, manager, where's the homies? And manager's like, oh yeah, I don't know, man. Like we're gonna get the authorities involved. We'll be sure to investigate this. We meet the big boss. The big boss has a son. So Xu Sheng and one of his homies go to confront the boss because they're like, yo, what's the deal? Like, where's our homies? They get attacked and they fight. They're pretty good and they get killed. So blah, 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 blah. We shoot into the future a little bit. Cheng is worried. Where's my homies? The workers show up at the manager's spot, like, yo, where's everybody at? And the overseers, they show up and they just start beating everybody up. Stop asking questions. It's just a big beatdown. In the middle of the fight, Cheng, somebody accidentally punches him. And then the music wiles out. Like, that's a note that I put. And like his boy, so one of his boys is like, Cheng, don't just stand there, fight. But of course, he has promised his mother that he would not fight. He's got a little, he's got a locket even that he keeps with him, you know, to remember that memory. So in the middle of this brawl, all these people are coming, right? A bus full of more Pinkerton thugs shows up, and Cheng gets a stray fist again. The music wows out again, and that's it. He's had enough. Now it's a Bruce Lee movie, and he just starts kicking dudes. So then, you know, they try him, and he beats them all up. And that's when Cheng notices that locket is on the ground busted. So that promise, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to keep it. The manager comes out, and it's like, oh, dip. Okay, yo, Cheng, let me talk to you real quick. They disappear. Cheng comes back out. The workers was like, what do you say? What do you say? Like, are we getting more money? Are our hours getting better? Like, what's going on with our health care? You know, like, so Cheng's just like, oh, he made me the new foreman. And the old foreman, the overseer, has now been demoted to like just one of you again. And everyone's like, yay, I guess. So they get back home. And Chow Mei, who is the love interest / cousin, is like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, my homies, my brothers are still missing. And like, y'all are celebrating and having a good time and getting into like brawls. Like, what's wrong with you? Cheng's like, oh, true. So he goes and he talks to the manager, and the manager's like, oh, no, authorities are on the job, man. So then it like cuts to the workers are back home. And they're like, oh, where's Cheng? And they're like, oh, he was going to talk to the manager and then go to the police to, you know, look into our missing homies. We should wait to eat until he shows up. Bam, cut. Cheng is having dinner with the manager and some sort of like, tea house of ill repute, and it gets a little wild. They get my man drunk. So this scene is basically the nigga shit of this movie. Cheng, he's got this great kung fu, and now he's in this room with a couple of like manager types, and he's getting drunk, and they're like, oh yeah, man, why don't you break some stuff with your kung fu, man? And he's like, yeah, nigga shit, nigga shit. Push, he's breaking it. He gets wasted. He goes home with one of the girls. He's so wasted, he falls asleep. Next day, wakes up, doesn't know what he's done, and like bounces. He tries to go outside. This walk of shame is immediately cut short because he sees Chow Mei, that's the cousin / love interest, and she's like, oh, you coming out of this house of ill repute first thing in the morning when I was waiting up all night for you because we're worried because fools from the factory are going missing and your ass didn't even come home, but it turns out you were here? Like, okay. So my man Cheng is definitely like, oh, that kind of sucks. So cut to the factory, early morning. Cheng's work buddies are like, oh, where's Cheng? He didn't come home. They're all worried about him. He shows up fucking hungover, not showered. Where the fuck you been at? And he's like, oh, like I talked to the manager and they're like, oh, well, what did the police say? You went to look after our, he's like, oh, I kind of forgot to go talk to the police. His fam is like, yo, you a sellout. Like just, they cut him no slack. He's immediately a sellout. And for real, like to be fair, he definitely sold them out. But he's a fellow of good character. So he goes to see the big boss. The big boss, we kind of see his evil side because he like fucks up a maid that like spills something. But then he kind of like sweet talks Cheng into like, Cheng goes home. He feeling like, oh yeah, man, these higher ups like me, like we're vibing. Like it's cool. They got my back. I'm gonna tell my boys like, it's cool. And my note here is his friends fam are bitter, jaded, and none too keen on sellouts. So that shows what happens next. But then he goes back to, the restaurant / brothel / I don't know, like gentleman's club, wherever it was. And he talks to the girl and he's like, yo, what you know about, like people be missing from the factory? Like, what do you know about these guys? And she's like, yo, these guys are the worst. And they also are drug dealers. So Cheng's like, oh, shit. He bounces. And then the big boss's son, he shows up and assassinates the girl. And then a whole bunch of goons go to the place and they kidnap Chow Mei. And then Cheng sneaks into the factory at night and he starts investigating. And he finds some ice and he finds the drugs hidden in the ice. And then he sees a hand or like a foot hidden in the ice. And then he sees like a head. He gets it figured out.
There's an analogous scene in Sorry to Bother You.
Yes. Yeah. This is if he had just gone into the jade door instead of the owl door, he wouldn't have seen any of this. So instead, the boss's son and the whole goon squad arrives and there's a big ass fight. And then Cheng and who I have written down as Bossy Bosserson, they show down. I'm just going to spoil this for everybody. Bruce Lee wins the fight. So he goes home and there's blood on the ground. All the cousins have been killed. Okay, so, you know what happens after that. Obviously, he has to decide to fight. Meanwhile, the big boss is like, yo, where's my son at? Goons, go find my son. And he's standing outside. This is so cool. He's standing outside and he happens to be holding some songbirds in this golden cage. Cheng shows up and he's like, hey, big boss, like, you're whack. This shit is bogus. And he tells all the goons, like, go home. This ain't your fight. But goons, much like the New York Police Department, refuse to go home and involve themselves in a fight that they really shouldn't. And my note is, this is the hill they die on. Then, before the final battle can start, this is why I had to bring up this golden cage thing. is Chang just like, I don't know if he kicks something or throws a knife. He breaks the damn cage. Dude is standing all the way across like a whole courtyard or a field. He fucking throws this shit, breaks the cage, the birds go free. So then there's a big fight. Chang is really, really dope, but the boss keeps bringing out knives. A character who I have to say I didn't notice their introduction frees Chow Mei, who had been kidnapped and was in fact being held at the big boss's place. So she pieces out. Chang and the big boss are fighting. Chang's getting all cut up. And the boss tosses a knife. Chang kicks it back at him, hits him in the gut, and with 0% warning, Chang just rushes up on him and like Fist of the North Stars his fingers right into the big boss's like body. Big boss falls. And then the cops show up and they cuff Chang. And Chow Mei shows up and he's like, it's okay. And that's the end of the movie. And it's kind of like, it's got a little bit of that Chinese Connection end where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you know, like you can seek justice, but the dumb authorities are not there for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a bleak movie.
Yeah.
Honestly, like it's a bleak movie. It's also kind of I'm guessing that most people who listen to our podcast have probably seen Sorry to Bother You and are familiar with what happens in it, but it's very similar plot.
Oh yeah,
it's the same movie.
Yeah, it's good. This is great. This is a great double feature.
Yeah, I texted Nicole right after when Nicole you said they're pretty much the same movie, and I was like, okay, sure. And then I watched it and I texted you. I was like, oh no, you're right. They literally are the same movie.
Yeah. This is the Office Space Fight Club of this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But those are the same movie. Came out the same year. Just slightly different takes.
I never really thought about that. That makes a whole lot of sense.
No, that's true. That's 100. Yes. So Sorry to Bother You is basically the same movie. It's about a worker struggle. There's Cassius Green living in Oakland, played by Lakeith Stanfield, dating Detroit, played by Tessa Thompson, and he's broke. He's living in his uncle's garage. His uncle's also broke, maybe going to lose his house. He really needs a job. He applies for a job at Regal View to be a telemarketer. Gets the job. It's a bullshit job. Like we all know, the workers are being exploited. There's a guy there named Squeeze who's interested in organizing the workers. Unlike The Big Boss, which is mostly about people are going missing. Oh, look, they're actually getting murdered. And that being uncovered and avenged. Sorry to Bother You is structured around an actual like labor struggle where there's a work stoppage followed by a strike. Cassius, now being here at Regal View, has to, decide, am I going to join the strike or not? He's an interestingly very passive protagonist for a film, which he has in common in a lot of ways with Chang. That's a big similarity between the two of them. They're two people who are just trying to earn a living. They go into a space where there's a lot of wild shit going on, and mostly at first, they just want to kind of keep their heads down and make their money. But Cassius, he's up against a wall. It's just like, which side are you on? He has to choose. Either he's going to be part of the strike or he's going to break the strike. So he's a part of the strike, or before it becomes a full-on strike, it's just a work stoppage where everybody puts down their phones at the same time. Squeeze gets up and talks. They all start chanting, fuck you, Regal View. Cassius gets brought into the big office and he's all scared, but it turns out they're not about to fire him. They are going to offer him a promotion. Much like when Bruce Lee beats up the foreman and all his goons, rather than like you participate in the struggle, but oh no, we don't want to fire you. We want to co-opt you. We like your spunk, And so, your moxie. Yeah. And so Cassius gets promoted to be a power caller, which means he gets to go up to the mysterious higher floors where the real money is made. And in doing so, gets alienated from his girlfriend and his friends who are like a part of this, who are striking. He starts breaking the strike, going through the line to like go up and do his job. He's making bank. He's making so much money. But at first he was like, no, I can't take this promotion because he finds out what they're selling is weapons of war and slave labor. And he's kind of like, hey, it's one thing to sell some encyclopedias to somebody who maybe can't 100% afford it. It's a whole other thing to sell something that's going to kill a lot of people or is literal slavery. But then he's shown the number of how much it is. And he's like, I can't turn this down. So he's just doing it. And things progress. He ends up breaking up with his girlfriend over it. A lot of cool stuff happens. And again, though, a thing happens where in the scene Che mentioned earlier, he goes to a party at the house of Steve Lift, who is the CEO of a company called Worry Free, where people can work and live in the same place, save money, have everything be taken care of, be living worry free, and goes into a secret room where basically it's revealed that, before it's revealed to him, he needs to go to the bathroom, runs into a horrifying horse person, and then a bunch more horse people. Yeah, because Steve Lift is like, yeah, fine, go to the bathroom, go through the jade door. It's the jade door, but he goes through the olive door.
Idiot.
Which is where the horse people lie. And he comes back and basically Steve Lift's like, no, I've got this whole like ridiculous plan where I'm just going to breed horse people, but also I want to turn you into a horse person so that you can be kind of like the go-between between like man, like us and the horse people. Like they'll think that you're like, you've got so much moxie, you know, you could be, as Steve Lift puts it, interestingly, the Martin Luther King of Equisapiens. And he's like, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. But then there's this question of like, because Cassius did a bunch of coke that Steve Lift offered him because he didn't really quite know how not to. And then it's like, it turns out that you inhale the serum or whatever it is that turns you into an Equisapium in much the way you would cocaine. He's
it's
like,
a binding agent.
Wait, did I already ingest the binding agent? And Steve Lift is like, no, I wouldn't do that to you. Or would I? I don't know. And so he's not 100% sure. But like at this point, finally, Cassius has reached his breaking point. And he's like, okay, maybe I could sell slave labor and weapons of war that kill a lot of people, but I cannot participate in turning people into horse people slaves. That's a bridge too far. So then actually he gets back in the struggle. He teams up with the Equisapiens. He uses what he has learned being on the inside with Steve Lift and becomes a part of the strike again, makes an important appearance there, teams up with the Equisapiens, breaks them out of their prison. They come join the struggle too. And Regal View workers actually end up winning the strike because the last time when they bring in the goons to start beating everyone's heads in, this time they have Equisapiens to come. And there's an awesome scene of the Equisapiens like pushing the armored police van back down the street. Like we all wish we could have some Equisapiens with us a lot of other times. And so things are looking good. He gets back with Detroit, but then, you know, there's this like button at the end pre-credits where his face is turning into a horse face, basically. So psych, he thought he didn't ingest the binding agent, but he actually did. And then over the credits, we get to see some cool shit where it becomes clear that like Cassius and the other Equisapiens go to Steve Lift's house and are going to kick his ass, basically. And that's the end. So it's a little bit of a bleak film as well, in that our protagonist is non-consensually turned into an Equisapien slave, which is not great. However, he did finally become a part of this collective labor struggle that was ultimately successful. And at the end, he got his vengeance, and we don't see him get dragged off in handcuffs. So Sorry to Bother You arguably shows a little bit more of a way forward from the problem, whereas The Big Boss is just a pretty accurate analysis of like, yeah, everything sucks, you're trapped.
While Sorry to Bother You is a surrealistic satire and The Big Boss is an action-packed kung fu flick, both films are concerned with the exploitation of workers and inherent dangers of capitalism, as hopefully obvious from both of those descriptions. Both follow kind of an everyman when it comes to Cassius and Cheng, who's just trying to earn a living, as we said, and gets a new quote-unquote unskilled labor job for as inaccurate as that particular term is, at which they both excel and discover horrific hidden mistreatment of workers. Question becomes, will Cassius and Chang act in solidarity with their fellow workers and take a stand, or continue their climb up the company ladder to riches, or at least paid bills? So that is the connection between these two films. And so with that, we're going to take a short ad break now. And then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about our personal reactions to the films, which we've already more or less hinted at, get into the critical response of Sorry to Bother You and The Big Boss, and then we'll dive into some questions about how these two films confront the horrors of capitalism and exploitation of workers. So we'll be right back after capitalism. Well, that was some good capitalism that we just had with our ads. So do we want to talk? We got a lot, I think, in the descriptions of it from everybody, but a little bit about what do we feel about these two movies, about Sorry to Bother You and The Big Boss.
Real quick, I love both these movies. I've now seen The Big Boss twice. Like, we did this episode because I watched The Big Boss with my husband, and we were like, holy shit, we should do an episode of the Celluloid Mirror about this, and Sorry to Bother You. And also, this movie is awesome. And then I watched it again in prepping for this episode. I think it's great. And Sorry to Bother You, this is maybe like the fourth time I've seen it, I think. I saw it a couple times in the theater, and I've watched it since it's been on Hulu. And I think it's maybe just kind of one of my favorite movies at this point. Like, it's real good. And every time I watch it, I just like it more. And also, read the screenplay. Really fucking good screenplay. So yeah, I love both these movies, and Sorry to Bother You, I just especially love.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Sorry to Bother You. I think this is probably my fifth time seeing it. I lost count of how many times I watched it at home, but I know I saw it twice in the theater because my wife and I saw it in the theater on a Friday, and I tweeted about how much, I would be great to, I almost want to go and see that again. And then you texted me, Nicole, and said that you and your Sean were going to go see it on Saturday, and you just got tickets. And I turned to my wife. We had been home for maybe half an hour from the movie. And I said, hey, do you want to go see that movie again? She said, when? I said, tomorrow night with Sean and Nicole. And she said, sure. And so we saw it again that Saturday with you guys. And then I've watched it a couple times at home. Love that movie. Love what's in the movie, but also one of the things that I love about the movie, aside from like the content, is also I love a movie that just surprises me. And I did not expect the Equisapiens, and I was so like just overjoyed. And then it worked so well again as the second time. It's just like like a movie that makes
Easter eggs. They're all the
oh my
Easter
God.
eggs.
Stuff is planted throughout, and I'm just like, I'm watching it again this time. Like there was all sorts of things. I was like, oh, that like it's an experience every time, which I love. And I feel like I don't get that enough from movies. I know where stuff is going enough that I kind of tune out a lot of the time. Which honestly kind of happened a little bit with The Big Boss, which I enjoyed, but there was a lot of stuff where I just kind of was like, okay, and they're fighting now. Okay. But the music, which you highlighted, Che, like I remember a couple of times during that movie being like, oh my God, this music is amazing. But was also like fun. And also, when you said we should do these two movies together, cause they're pretty much the same thing, I was dubious, but then I watched it and texted you right after, and
now you're a believer.
They're the same fucking movie.
Same movie.
Che, how do you feel?
I love both these movies. I saw The Big Boss. Well, the first time I can remember seeing The Big Boss was probably in high school. I had a collection of friends that would gather and watch martial arts movies. And, you know, if you have that collection of friends in high school in the 90s, it's because someone is getting to go to New York and they're bringing back like bootlegs. So it was pretty cool. It was, you know, it was like, it was a cultural thing as well as just a, you know, awesome movie. And the thing about Kung Fu movies, especially, you know, at that point in time, they were so low budget, the things that we were seeing and the things that were easy to get your hands on. And there was something really charming about that, that made them accessible in a way that, like, you know, a Hollywood epic wasn't. And of course, obviously, you know, there's a lot of underdogs against the imperialist or capitalist powers or whatever that you see in a lot of Kung Fu movies. Or in the words of Dead Prez, they say karate needs empty hands. I guess it's perfect for the poor man. So, you know, it's always like, always something exciting about any Kung Fu movie, but Big Boss is really sort of like this peak kind of like, you know, it just feels like, there were not quite any rules yet. The you know, like the Hong Kong cinema machine hadn't quite settled into all of its formula. And there's just something a little bit grimy about it in a way that's different from the grimy of like the 80s movies. And I really dig it. The music is awesome. The beginning credit sequence, they do a whole lot with very little.
Love it.
I forgot about that.
It's so fresh. It's just this one like screen print of Bruce Lee doing a kick. And
it looks so good.
It's so good.
You're just like, I just want to watch these opening credits.
And the music's so fresh. I'll be honest, I had to remember that I was like working and watching the movie and taking notes so that I could say something about it, because during that I immediately wanted to try to find the album on like eBay, like on vinyl. That's what I wanted. I was like, oh, I gotta sample this. As though
you can still do that.
Yeah, I still can, but here's a truth. Here's a truth for 2020. I'm not sampling anything. I'm not sampling it. Like maybe in 2021, if things go in, you know, a direction that I have not yet been able to predict, I'll get back into sampling things. But for now, you know, maybe I'll. There's other stuff to do. But yeah, no. So Big Boss is great. You know, it doesn't. You know, by today's Kung Fu standards, the choreography is quite basic. But you know, a lot of times with a Bruce Lee movie, it's not even necessarily about the, you know, the ballet of exchange. It's about Bruce Lee is, you know, he's like the Michael Jordan of like martial arts filmmaking, and like in a way that is very rare, he radiates off the screen. And so, you know, you see him move and it's just like, damn, like this guy is like, it's like crazy. You feel a little bit like you're in the presence of something when you're watching Bruce Lee on, you know, this is just also because of the age I am, but the 1992 Olympic basketball dream team, which consisted of, you know, amongst others, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Patrick Ewing.
I hadn't thought about that in a minute.
Listen, I think about this dream team all the time because it was literally like, it was like a, you know, like sometimes when they had to come up, it was like when they come up with the Avengers team, that's like, wait a minute. The Avengers is made up of the Hulk, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and like, you know, like they like threw, and you're like, what? Everybody. This is awesome. Like that's what the Dream Team was like. It was like preposterous to put all of like the best basketball players in the world on one team. But then when you watch the game, you were like, yo, these guys are so good at this sport. They're so good. And that's what it's like watching Bruce Lee. Is it's like watching Michael Jordan and like Magic Johnson like fucking work off each other with Scottie Pippen also like that. So I love it. And so, yeah. And also it's just a movie about like an average guy who's just trying to do right, getting, you know, like kind of like hoodwinked by the, you know, the glitz and glam of the bourgeoisie. So you got to love that in a movie. And then Sorry to Bother You is the same movie, but more Boots Riley. So it's, you know, good for different and the same reasons. But no, Sorry to Bother You is one of those movies that when I saw it, I was like, well, this is great because I don't have to make a movie. But this sucks because, man, this already got made. It was so, like, it checked off so many boxes on my, like, list of things that I'm, like, want in movies. And you know, like, it clearly wears its sort of surreal Michel Gondry influence, like on its sleeve. There's like kind of like a about Michel Gondry in the film itself. You know, like it uses cinema in a way that is not literal, which is so refreshing to see, especially in sort of like the in the 21st century, but like the second, you know, like the like teens into the like,
yeah,
it's like people kind of forgot that like this is make believe, and like it, you know, like we can
do
play.
anything we want.
Yeah.
You can do whatever absurd, ridiculous thing you can dream up. And part of why people go to the movies is to see something they haven't seen before.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, so it's like this sort of rekindles, you know, like for a lot of people, if they weren't like really into like stuff that was happening in the experimental space, like Pulp Fiction really sort of shook things up for like a broader audience. It was like non-linear, but the thing that to me was super cool was when she does the square thing and it draws the square. Like to me, I was like, oh, what? Like you can do that in a movie.
Same.
And so, you know, like Sorry to Bother You taps into that same place where it's like, yeah, we could do whatever we want. It very much reminds me of, you know, like The Science of Sleep. So that's cool. But again, Boots Riley, of, you know, like, so, you know, it's going to be hip hop, is going to be pretty socialist, pretty, you know, pretty anti-capitalist. It's not going to ride the fence.
No,
it's probably going to kill your landlord. And pick a bigger weapon. So it's really cool, and man, it works on so many levels. I saw it when I first saw it. I was like, wow, this is great. I saw it again. I was like, wow, this is great. The most recent time I watched it, I have in between the last viewings, I have read Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism, which is a seminal text about the Black radical tradition. And I've also sort of Doven. I've definitely dovened into James Baldwin again. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff from both of these works that were like really, or both from Black Marxism and from the catalog of Baldwin that was really standing out to me this time. And I could go on about this forever, but what I want to say real quick is that one of the things that really stood out to me is, Baldwin often spoke about, he would say, what the white man sees when he looks at me is not me. I don't know what it is, but it's not me. Like that's what Baldwin would say. And he would talk about this construction. And Cedric Robinson talks about, the invention of the Negro. And, he speaks about, Europe's, relationship to Africans and to Black people prior to the era of colonialism was one where like the Moors were just in charge in Spain and the Iberian Peninsula. And Islam was the dominant religion in southern, Europe at that moment. And the Ethiopians were known as like this super advanced people, the Ethiops and stuff. And so there's, a time occurs where suddenly we have to create this idea of the Negro, which are these savages that, can be saved by being brought to work for white people, blah, blah. And so in that, there's this whole story in Sorry to Bother You about the construction of the Equisapien and sort of this creation of like, I don't know what it is that you see when you look at me, but it's not what I see. And so it's sort of like when Steve Lift looks at workers, when Steve Lift looks at Black people, but in this case, when Steve Lift looks at workers, he sees like, yeah, well, it would be better if they were stronger and just could work longer and be blah, blah. I mean, he says all this stuff.
Yeah.
And in a scene that's great because it really is aimed at trying to get you to understand it. You can be a terrible person without being actively mean. Like he says the whole time, he's like, oh, I didn't want you to think I was crazy. Like, this is just gonna make more money. Like, no, I'm not a maniac. Like, this is just efficient to profit from. And so like, yeah, no. So, yeah, Sorry to Bother You is great. There's a couple of things in it that sort of got stuck in my craw. But I also had the opportunity to watch like a Q&A with Boots. And the thing that he said that was the most amazing to me was like, he didn't set out to make that movie. Like he just set out to write a movie that like he and then like, that's the movie that like Boots Riley would write, as opposed to him setting out to be like, okay, I need to make a movie that's like a perfect encapsulation of my views about capitalism and, does this, that. He just wanted to make a movie and this is what happened. And I'm like, damn, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Like, just kind of like trust your artistic instinct. And then, and like, he literally was like, yeah, like the metaphor, I didn't seek the metaphors. Like I just wrote stuff and then was like, oh, dip, that's kind of like that. And then sometimes was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that. It's about really like tapping into like kind of like that artistic truth and like trusting. And art is also a major theme in that movie.
It's interesting what you were saying about, I had a similar thing with Sorry to Bother You, having worked in multiple different kinds of call centers, some of which I may have made films about. Well, not about in the call center,
right,
about at-home calls, but I had previously worked for 4 years in a call center and before that did not sales, but I did market research, cold calling, which is actually how I ended up being like, I should just get a phone sex job. Honestly, from doing that shit, people treat you terribly. But when In the like when I was first hearing about the film, well, I was hearing about the film way before it came out because I remember Boots had written the script and was talking about that, and the Coup released an album called Sorry to Bother You, which is not the same as the Sorry to Bother You soundtrack, which I had and had been kind of following that this was this film project he had for a long time, and I didn't know if it was ever going to actually get made. And when it did, and like the trailers came out and stuff, a part of me was like, oh man, there was a movie in me that I'm never going to make now because he already did it, about the realities of things about being in a call center. And it was like this bittersweet thing of both being so excited and feeling weirdly seen by what was on screen, and also being like, God damn it, Nicole, why didn't you like get on it earlier and blah, 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 blah. But like that side of it is ultimately not as helpful. And one of the things I love so much about this film is I feel like every time I watch it, I feel very genuinely inspired in a lot of the same things you were saying, Che, about exactly like fucking do whatever the fuck shit it is that you feel passionate about, that feels true and real to you. And if you follow that, you just kind of need to trust that something's going to come out that's going to be cool, or at least you can rewrite into something that's going to be cool. And if if you've been following Boots Riley's career, if you've been listening to The Coup, this is exactly the movie you would expect Boots Riley to make. Like exactly in terms of the politics, but also in terms of the humor, in terms of kind of some of the absurdism that he brings into it, like the whole package. And it's unlike any other movie other than The Big Boss that exists. Yeah. And probably, actually, this is probably a whole subgenre of movies that are this, of everyday guys just trying to earn a living, get seduced by, oh, but you could come in and be part of, like, the fancies. And, meanwhile, your coworkers are being disappeared or killed or turned into Equisapiens, and you have to make a choice. Like, I bet there's actually a lot of films that are that. But but these two, they have almost the same plot, but they're completely different genres, right? They're completely different tones. They're edited differently. They're shot differently. They're stylistically don't really have very much in common at all. But they do tell this core story, which I'm interested that this isn't a story that's that we're not just all three of us off the top of our heads like, oh yeah, like these 25 other movies, like we could, if we wanted to talk about a story about, oh, I don't know, a cop who's like about to retire and then gets paired with a new partner who's a little bit different from him. Like,
well, here's what I'm going to say. This movie is Josie and the Pussycats. It's the music film because it's about the scrappy one of the gang getting elevated above the gang.
Brainwashed by it. Yeah.
Right. And it's sort of like, and it can go in a couple of directions. It can be like the pride cometh before the fall. Is that an expression, or did I just...
Yeah,
sure?
yeah, it is, yeah.
It sounds like it is. If it's not, I made it up, and now it's real.
Just claim it. Just claim
Internet,
it. It's yours now.
2020. Everything's real. Everything's nothing. Everything is everything. Shout out AKD. These movies are great. Yeah. And no, but it's the rock and roll movie. It's about it's you're a scrappy member of the Every Person, the Garage Band, the Bad News Bears or something. I don't know. And then we got a good, we've got an opportunity to sell out. And then you're like, oh, when you sell out, these people are actually, they're evil, come to think of it. They're trying to brainwash people.
And what happens to me when I ascend? Am I going to be turned into a horse person, or am I just going to be a willing party in the literal murder and dismemberment and shipping out in giant blocks of ice of my friends?
Yes, and heroin.
And heroin as well. We usually talk about critical responses. I don't think we need to do that.
I don't
that
give a
much.
Shit. They're really like
one thing. I mean, we don't know what they thought about The Big Boss because it was not widely reviewed.
No.
And sorry to bother you, the one thing that I think is interesting is it got like largely very good reviews. People were like, somehow it was, and I'm a little surprised by that because it's such a weird movie and it's such a radical movie. I will say that most of the reviews didn't really engage with the anti-capitalist politics of it. They did pick up on what they would call like the racial satire elements. They're like, oh, and he gets
Yeah.
a job. And he has to use his white voice, a thing I didn't even mention in my synopsis. Not because it's not important, because it is like a pivotal thing in the whole film. But it's not like the only thing.
Right.
There's a lot of things in that film. And the take on it in a lot of the reviews was just like, they would just be like, oh, the racial satire. He's a black guy, and then to be successful, he has to talk white. Oh, I kind of get that. Cool. But like didn't take it any deeper. Even though as you go through the film, like once he gets to go to the higher levels, Mr. X,
Right,
the guy,
yeah, Mr. Yeah.
speaking of absurdist things, this character whose name is bleeped out. We don't know why every single time. And Boots is like, that's what I want to do. We're just going to do that. And I respect and am inspired by that. But like when he gets up there, Mr. Bleep, who is also black, is like, oh no, white voice only up here. So they have to stay in the white voice 100% of the time when they are at the higher levels of this. So, you know, I mean, I think it's a deep thing that is about, you know, what happens to you if you're black and trying to be in the United States and make any money. And, you know, so it's not that it's not worth discussing, but I felt like a lot of the critical engagement was very shallow and almost more on the level of like, white people are like this and black people are like this.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's a black guy, but it's David Cross's voice.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the really great things about the movie, though, is that it's wrapped in this hilarity and has these little nuggets of things for people to latch on to. Well, it's also giving you this stuff that you know is true, and we resist when people get too in our face about it, even though it's very in your face about it. When people start telling you like, well, you know, capitalism's a problem and, you know, we've got this kind of modern day slavery going on here. He just kind of like puts like a nice coating around it and says, here, take this. And here's a little thing over here that's also relevant that you critics are going to latch on to because it's got Patton Oswalt and David Cross. And you guys love those guys. So take that. And they fixate on that. They absorb the rest of it, but they kind of let it wash over them. Because I know like the work stuff, I registered it when I first watched it, but I didn't quite fully like go like, oh, until I think the second time really like absorbing it and kind of getting like the surrealism and the humor and all of that. But and I didn't have really any context for Boots Riley before seeing the movie. Like it's not where I exist artistically. I don't know a whole lot about him before that. So for me, it was all very surprising and fun. And I think that was one of the great things about the movie is it kind of gives all of this package that you would normally, like critics would normally be kind of resistant to. And in a thing where it's like, you can't be resistant to this. We got Danny Glover. We got David Cross. We got Patton Oswalt. Rosario Dawson's the elevator. You love all this stuff, and this is and it's also unimpeachably like a good movie. Like, you know, it's just a good movie, well constructed, funny. It's got great stuff to hook on to, stylistic. So he just kind of constructed like this nice package to deliver his message.
Yeah.
Which is like the whole project of the coup.
Yeah.
Right.
Was doing music like that. And his thing was always like, I'm not trying to be one of those people doing shitty political music to get my message across. I want to do good music that also is these other things, but also that people enjoy because it's a good song and the beat is good and the lyrics are good and etc. It does remind me a little bit, though, of what we discussed on our last episode when Che was not here. But we discussed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Babe and how critics of those films didn't really want to engage with a lot of the subject matter of those films.
That's true.
And this feels a little bit similar to me. Like, as far as they want to go, they're like, oh, edgy racial satire, and we're not going to explain exactly what we even mean by that. And I get what you're saying, Sean, that like there's a lot going on to discuss. But also, as a film, if you're writing a review of a film, your job is to like talk about the film, which a lot of critics did. It's not like it went over everyone's heads or anything. But most of these positive reviews were just like so surreal, so wild. This like edgy funny racial satire. I won't say exactly what it's satirizing because I'm probably a white critic who feels uncomfortable doing so, and this should have been assigned to somebody else. But
well, it's almost like there's an inherent flaw in that criticism is based on a single viewing with a short deadline. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what it is, but it could be. It could be that the basis of criticism for an entire art form being that people see it once and have a deadline in 3 days might not produce the best discussion on films.
I do have something to say about critics not engaging with the layers of Sorry to Bother You. Is especially they say racial satire and they just you're exactly right. They're just like, "Bah." You know, white guys are all booby dooby doo and black guys are all boom, 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 boom. And Danny Glover's character, Langston, very poignantly says, like, you know, you're selling them what they think whiteness is. And like the whole thing is about this construction of identity. That's very, you know, that's in the vein of season 1 of Mad Men. Like it's exactly the same thing, but just articulated differently. And so I think, you know, like, you know, there is, of course, obviously a very powerful racial commentary here. But when people just think it's about a black guy using a white voice, it's like they've missed the entire, you know, like, because, you know, like Cash even says, "Oh, you mean like, well, hello, I'm Cassius Green, blah, blah, blah." And Danny Glover's like, "Nah, I'm not talking about like sounding nasal. I'm talking about like you don't have a care in the world. Like, you know, like you're never going to have to worry about where rent is coming from." And he goes through this whole thing, which is very much about class. So it's, you know, it's inherently tying like whiteness to class, but also explaining that it's a myth. It's a, you know, it's a icon or a idol that, you know, like that is this place that people strive to and want to see reflect, you know, they want to see themselves reflected in it or whatever. And it, you know, it's like he legit just says that's what it's about. And it's, you know, if you are a reviewer and you're seeing it during reviews and you got to write something really quick and you're also not, you know, literate maybe in the Black radical tradition or in any sort of like question, like white debunking of whiteness or any of that stuff, or any of the terrorist ideology of critical race theory, then like, you know, you're going to probably miss that. And then it just, you know, you kind of have to wonder, well, how are you qualified to review movies, bruh? Like, yeah,
it's on it. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, okay. You've seen a bunch of films, but you don't know nothing about whiteness in a country that's just built out of whiteness. Like, come on, get the fuck out of here, man.
Well, you know, if we're gonna have a country built out of whiteness, that's kind of part of the deal. Is like the first rule of White Club is you don't. You don't. So, but it's very, it's related to what you were saying, though, a minute ago about when Steve Lift is like when Cash is kind of realizing how Steve Lift sees him. And in fact, I believe when he explains to Detroit why he's finally out, his rationale is like, oh, he just sees me as a resource. Like, even though he's like, here, drink these expensive drinks, do this expensive cocaine, or, you know, Equisapien, trigger or whatever the case may be, but like
binding agent.
Like binding agent. He doesn't he does not see me as a person. He ultimately fundamentally is going to dehumanize me because of his relationship to me, right? But kind of like the other side of that is then what are his workers, in this case specifically Black workers, reflecting back to these wealthy clients they're supposed to sell to, right? Because they're reflecting back to them a vision of themselves. And that's exactly the Danny Glover monologue, which when I was when I was watching it last night, I was just like, through that whole thing, I was like, this is just like gems upon gems.
Mhm.
This is really, really good.
Yeah.
Because it's it's about how white people want to see themselves. Like this is I don't want to go into anything about Trump right now, in part because this isn't coming out till November, and this isn't coming out till after the election. But it's not really about the election. It's just about the Trump phenomenon, which hopefully history won't have forgotten by late November. Which is about white supremacy and like this deal that white people make, where it's like, I will actually sell out some of my own economic interests and all sorts of other shit and kill my family, literally, as is going on right now, in order to be able to hold on to this idea of who I am that I see when I look at this man. Like, this man is reflecting back to me a version of myself that I want to see, so I'm going to take this devil's bargain. And that's related to the thing in Sorry to Bother You. It's like, they're being like, hey, you know how it is. Like, it's reflecting back to them, you're good, you're fine, everything's great. And a theme throughout the movie is once you ascend to a certain level, you have people or machines, elevators, random recordings, just stroking your ego all of the time, reflecting back to you, being a mirror. This is a show about reflections, right? And like reflecting back whatever it is that like you want to believe. And that's the fiction of whiteness that is like, one of the cornerstones of white supremacy. But it is this other side of like, then those white people looking back on the workers, it's in this dehumanizing way, and that you can't have one side without the other, right?
Absolutely. Which I think leads us into the first question that we wanted to I mean, we could just keep going on all of this, but which is, how do these films portray the participation of workers in capitalist exploitation? I mean, we're already kind of getting into that. I think there's something interesting from this Cine Outsider review of The Big Boss that I think stated well what we've mentioned about what The Big Boss kind of reflects these themes that are in Sorry to Bother You much more clearly and much more, I think, intentionally. But where does this start again? Offering a socialist revolutionary reading in which honest working men are pitted against morally bankrupt and evil capitalists who put profit over human life and revel in the luxuries of their ill-gotten gains. It even offers a comment on the dangers of being seduced by materialist trappings, as well as providing a link to kung fu as a method of self-defense employed by those near the bottom of the social ladder, a fighting form for the unarmed peasant rather than the protected social elite. So they were kind of drawing this relationship between specifically like kung fu as something of this working class group, and almost as a sort of as a counter in some respects to this materialist seduction that happens to Bruce Lee, which you described earlier, and when he's made foreman, and is something that we see in both films, and I think is a literal, well, not quite a literal seduction. He's wasted in the Big Boss,
but that's a kind of seduction.
It's a kind of seduction, but like when he, whatever happens with him and that girl, after he's wasted, I think he just fell asleep.
I'm pretty sure that's what they try to imply, because she's all like, oh, and then like, okay, and then he wakes up and he's like, huh? I'm sorry for those of you that are not watching the bonus Patreon video. You wouldn't have gained any more insight from the visuals, but whatever.
That's great.
There were some.
I think that we got that in the in the Big Boss. Is this pretty clearly represented in that system of like, when we can't just get rid of somebody, let's take the ringleader essentially, or a ringleader, and elevate him, basically to break the back of the people standing up for themselves.
Let's co-opt the revolution.
Mm-hmm. Which
let's go ahead and put up a hashtag, but definitely do not pay any reparations.
Yeah, we're gonna put a black square up on our Instagram.
Yeah.
Or one of my favorite, most like painful moments actually, and sorry to bother you, when we're in Steve Lift's house and he has the billboard that Detroit did, where she took, and whoever else from Left Eye who worked on it, like this worry-free ad where, oh, what did it say? Oh, it said like, show the world you're a responsible baby daddy.
Yeah.
And then she like whited out the letters, so it says show the world your response baby, which is like, even though I've seen this movie a lot of times, like when I saw her do the billboard, I was like, I'm like, that's so good. And then when I see him and he's like bought it or bought a reproduction or whatever it is, and he has it in his house,
as
it's so gutting. And because you can do that, you can just literally co-opt the revolution and be like, oh yeah, it's just in my living room now.
Yeah. And to go back to the Kung Fu, I was thinking a lot about how, the Kung Fu being the tool of the working class to break the shackles of the owners is like hip hop, of course. I mean, that's just where I'm coming from, is the tool of the working class to reclaim their space. And particularly in this film, the use of graffiti and public art is sort of the same thing. It's this thing, it's like, it doesn't, you don't need a $1 zillion ad campaign. You just need a mask, a fake beard, a limp, and some spray paint, and like you can change you can change the world around you.
But yeah, these are both movies that show how part of capitalist exploitation works is by, I would say, forcing people to participate in their own subjugation, right? Because like, people go into these situations through free choice. Nobody made Chang go to the one factory in town where he could possibly get a job because all the other places hiring are going to discriminate against people who aren't locals. For example.
Yeah, no, he had the right to work. That was a right to work state.
Yeah, it was a right to work state. And like, nobody made Cassius like be to the point where he's seriously considering going and living in a worry-free home. Or all the other characters who are like, worry-free. Like it shows, it's interesting all these different little ways that people, but I like Sorry to Bother You because it's super empathetic. It's not like being like, you're participating in your own subjugation. It's being like, this is how people can't help but participate in their own subjugation because they don't have options. It's about how am I going to let myself be exploited, not if I'm going to let myself be exploited. It's not an option. And Sorry to Bother You really, arguably indicts the system. It's not about the villain being Steve Lift. He's just a henchman.
Yeah. Well, and to jump into that is that I do think it's a in keeping with sort of a Boots Riley pedagogy, it's really a movie about collectives because of course it's about like a labor struggle or whatever, but throughout the whole thing, like Cash is like one of the things he's questioning is like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Like, why I want to do something important, and what difference does it make, and what's important? And of course, like Detroit, who is like, like, listen, I love this movie and I love Tessa Thompson. She's like dangerously close to a manic pixie dream girl. If someone says she was, I wouldn't really argue. And a thing that one of the things I dislike about it is that once Cassius Green has like, had his moral, change, once the character's gone through his change, then his reward is that Detroit and he are able to re-spark the relationship. And I'm going to say something that probably no one's ever said before, and definitely maybe I haven't said before, but this is one of those rare instances where Spider-Man 3 got it right. At the end of the movie, Peter goes to meet with Mary Jane, and Mary Jane simply agrees to speak with him. Because earlier in the film, under the influence of the symbiote, but nonetheless, earlier in the film, I'm pretty sure he accidentally clocks her or whatever. And that's like a hard line for her. And so one of the things that I thought was shockingly mature about the film is it wasn't just oh, well, once you save the day, all of the harm you did before is erased. It's just kind of well, all right. You got over whatever was going on before, and now you have to work to repair that or whatever, as opposed to just okay, you've made, you've learned your lesson. Now you get the girl. It's nah, man, this is a person who saw you do some fucked up shit, bro. She was and cause listen, Detroit really stood by Cassius for a really long time while he was fucking up. And because, they had a relationship and the struggle is real. And you make money and you're oh man, this might be my opportunity to turn shit around and blah, blah, blah. And there's there's a lot about, just sort of oh yeah, what I was saying originally was that he's wondering what's my point, what is how am I important, once the sun explodes, what difference will I have made, blah blah blah. And it's all, what am I gonna do, what am I gonna do, what am I gonna do? And this whole time everyone's telling him, be here with us, Detroit's be here with me, and Squeeze and all the and Sal and everyone at work at Langston, and then Detroit shows up at work too. They're all be a part of this movement. That's what you have to be. And he still is thinking, no, I gotta be I gotta be someone to be someone, I gotta work my way up and then I can change stuff, instead of I can be in solidarity and together we all change something. And so, there's something very, it's when I was watching it at the scene when he gets to the party, I was oh, a little bit right now I'm reading this as this is about Obama. It's a little bit you keep okay, all right, fine, okay, all right, okay. And then he finally gets somewhere and it's really? Still? This is still what we're doing? And I think, and there's something very profound about that, because he gets to the party and, he just gives them what they want. He understands at that moment, this is all they'll ever, they're vampires. They're taking from me. I only am here to give them shit.
Yeah, and giving them what they want is the price of admission to that party.
Yeah.
Or to any of these things. That's the deal.
So one of the other questions that we had, and I think we've already addressed, was who is the villain of both of these pieces?
Yeah,
I'd
say capital.
Yeah, go ahead.
Capitalism's the villain of Sorry to Bother You. I would also say capitalism's the villain of The Big Boss, but I don't think I have as ironclad a defense that was the filmmaker's intent. But
I mean, it's still there. I think it's the other side of capitalism, definitely. Well, not the other side. It's all the same thing. It's all the same continuum. The heroin trade stuff and crime and all of that is all still part of the same thing.
And just to make a quick argument against a case that neither of you nor any of our listeners have made, but I have made in my own head, which is The Big Boss arguably is more about an individual bad guy. But I would say just by virtue of the fact that like there's no other fucking work available, that's what indicts the system.
Yeah.
That like, but it would be easy to miss that and just see it as the story of like, oh, a corrupt drug dealer / murderer. That's a story everyone's very comfortable with. Well, that guy's bad.
That community,
but
it doesn't, like, the police clearly aren't doing anything about missing people and come and arrest Cheng at the end.
Yeah,
like,
that's actually the only time you see the police in the film. They
after they've all been like, everyone's just disappearing. They've been gone for no, but you know, and the only explanation that gets given, other than the lies about like, oh yeah, we're working with authorities, stuff's happening. We can't say what, but stuff. The other thing is they keep being like, well, you know how you workers are. You're always off like gambling, gambling and drinking and carousing, and they could have walked off a pier. I don't know.
No, exactly.
If you all were smarter, you'd be in my shoes.
Yeah, y'all are asking for it. If only you had complied, like nothing bad would happen.
And there's maybe even something to say about that. The fact that the police don't appear until the end is because the ultimate authority in that town is the ice factory that employs so many people, and that the capitalists we could extend it to corporations, but in just this sort of microcosm of that overall system of that, there's the police and there's the government system, but that is not nearly as powerful as the employment system under capitalism, which controls everything.
Follow the money.
Yeah. And just to like do a little bit of the math there, if you have a government that is reliant on taxes, then you have a government that is reliant on capital and thusly on the capitalists. Like, it's like you can't like even like, whatever kind of like checks and balances you build into that, like you kind of are just like, like we're kind of reliant on these mofos for everything. So, like the microcosm, the macrocosm, like I think in the film, it's very clear that it's just like my man had to move from where he lived before to here because this was his best shot at finding employment.
It's Thailand.
It's Thailand. There's like Thai like characters everywhere. And
also, because that was the thing I thought about. I was like, oh, could someone argue that this is some sort of like national difference? And I'm like, I really don't think it's portrayed that way. There was an interesting thing in one of our readings that I did not copy over.
That was about. It was interesting. That was about the reason that they shot in Thailand and the whole like the socioeconomics of like this Chinese production, this Hong Kong production shooting in Thailand, and that
was in that From Kung Fu to Hip Hop book. Right?
I think it was the other one.
The other one from Beyond Bruce Lee.
It was in I think it was in the Beyond Bruce Lee because it was in the same thing that was criticizing Kung Fu to hip hop. But it was talking about how that like there's this sort of not really hierarchy, but there, I guess, like this unspoken or maybe sometimes spoken hierarchy within East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the different countries, and like using Thailand as this poor place and depicting it as this poor place where he goes to work, and then there's this factory and it's so corrupt was something in kind of in and of itself coming from a Hong Kong studio. Almost interesting in that that's what they did. They specifically chose a place where, well, it's happening over here. It's happening over here in this dirty other place. Not in your backyard. It's happening over here. Is interesting in that respect, I think. Like the choice to use Thailand.
It's like setting something in future Detroit instead of just Detroit.
Right.
It's exotic.
Exotic future Detroit.
It's not happening in our backyards. It's happening in Detroit in the future.
It's not Exxon, it's OCP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if those are the villains in terms of the heroes, like the heroism in these films is about labor struggle in different, like it takes different forms. It's, I would argue, more effective in Sorry to Bother You, or I guess I don't need to argue that. It just is in the plot of the movie. Whereas like it's kind of ultimately futile for Bruce Lee. I mean, he does, Chow Mei is the name of his love interest. Like he does, like she gets unkidnapped.
Right.
So
right.
Maybe if he hadn't, that wouldn't have happened. So like there's that, but that's like the only positive thing that happens. It's just like, well, everyone's dead and you're going to prison.
Well, now, to be fair, that boss will not chop up any more workers.
True, but I also think it's implied that some other boss, some other head is going to pop up in his place to chop up many more workers.
Yeah,
he might just drown them.
Yeah,
there's a perfectly good river there.
Yeah. Like, you don't want to just have the same boss come back again. You got to get a new one with new management style.
Exactly. Who thinks outside the box and into the river.
Look, it can taint some of the ice. You don't want to taint the ice. You throw them in the river.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, that's another thing. I feel like eventually, like, you're selling ice, and then someone's like, hey, I bought this ice from you last week, and there's a human foot in it.
I assumed that they were.
Can I get like a discount and another ice? Can you refund that one and deliver me another block of ice?
Okay, but this one has a hand in it.
Okay. Do you have heroin ice? Anything like? Do you have anything like that?
We do have heroin ice. It's a little bit extra.
Wait. Also,
there might also be a head in it.
Do we know if it was heroin or opium? It could have been opium. I think it was just heroin.
In the dub, they just referred to it as dope.
Dope. They did call it dope.
They called it heroin in the subtitles.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll take the subtitles.
They definitely called it heroin.
Yeah.
So, what was the role of labor organizing in terms of heroics in these films against the villain of capitalism? I guess we kind of already talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think, like when we were speaking about solidarity or whatever, like I think labor organizing / solidarity / the people is the hero of the film, and in both cases, the protagonist is sort of just like the unlikely catalyst or linchpin in the, like whatever, like there's a way to read them where they're like the saviors or whatever. There's a way to read, like there's some fairly uncharitable ways to read, like how they're putting, like these things. But I sort of feel like I'm coming at it from a perspective that like, history is coming to a head and these characters just happen to like cross that path at that moment to be a part of what happens rather than they are the like, like cause or the you know what I mean? But yeah, so I feel like in both cases, the organizing of labor is the hero, and like the protagonist is the avatar of that hero.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things about both of them too, and I think we texted about it a little bit, Nicole, was that it's almost in both stories, it's almost a necessity for for the workers when they stand up for what they're standing up for to be ultimately successful is to have somebody who was elevated into the position of and was seduced by that power to be able to come back down, essentially. The Prometheus coming back down and saying, actually...
The Anakin Skywalker returning from the dark side, if you will.
Exactly. Except for... less whiny.
Yeah, no. I mean, I mean, bald eyebrow Anakin Skywalker.
No, I got you.
I'm not talking about
the Anakin who's throwing him over the over the thing. Yeah. No, they needed somebody who was brought up, and you know what? I guess we could just be talking about Return of the Jedi with these two, couldn't we? Like Cassius Green is Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, as is Chang is Darth Vader. They're all Darth Vader, but only if we look at we have to look at all of the first six parts of the Star Wars thing. After that, it doesn't make any sense. But
I think you only have to look at New Hope through Jedi and just listen to what the other characters say about Vader's backstory, and it still works.
They do explain it all.
They do.
Really.
We didn't need to see that unfold. They just told us what happened.
It's true, and it was better when they just told us.
They really did. Sometimes, let this be a lesson. Show don't tell. Not always true.
Yeah. Sometimes
really?
If you can tell it really fast.
Yeah.
And
if you can
give us the gaps.
I got to say something very controversial. If you can tell it in the first couple sentences of a text crawl at the beginning of a franchise, you don't necessarily need to extend that to be like 212 minutes long.
That is very fair. That is
one does have the option to not do that.
You could not do it.
It's true. You just say
no one's going to arrest
pretext.
you. No one's going to beat you up. In fact, they might be less likely to beat you up.
At the same time,
end prequels.
At the same time, if you do choose to do that, like, you could do worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
better.
But the idea of that there is that you do kind of have to have somebody in these movies. I don't know if we actually have to have somebody, but you do kind of have to have somebody who
it's the Buddha.
Prodigal son.
Yeah.
It's the Buddha, right? Like, he's the prince, and then I guess it's not the Buddha, because the Buddha starts off the prince and then falls.
And then comes down.
That's like Jet Li's Fearless. One of those. This is definitely the like Hudsucker proxy.
Yeah.
No, that is very true.
And maybe it's just narratively in the sense of like, we need a vehicle for the audience to see the alternative. But effective in that sense. It's like, it's not just that they're bad, it's that they're bad and they'll make you part of them. And that's how they persist.
Yes.
As they absorb you. And it's viral.
Well, and it is viral. It's like The Matrix. It's like when Agent Smith starts infecting people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was... No, you go ahead, and then I'm going to come back to it.
I was just going to say it's viral, and it's also violent, because those are words that start
with the same...
with VI.
Yeah, with the same sound.
Yes.
Viral violence.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And violet.
And both of these characters' redemption has to do with acts that violence is part of their redemption, right? and one of the things I like, I'm not going to pose the question of how do these films portray violence on the part of capitalists and workers, and I will just show my hand as we have throughout this entire episode already, because this has come up a few times. I feel like both these films illustrate and bring to life the inherent systemic violence of capitalism, period.
Yes.
You get two different manifestations of it, but I feel like in both cases you're seeing it's not just about the Equisapiens or even the general selling slavery or the general weapons, and it's not just about the fucking foot in a block of ice and the heroin in a different block of ice. Before you even got to these particular problems, everything was fucked up in both of these movies.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And wherever any of these characters go, there's really nowhere for them to go. And that's part of what I think is radical about both of them. Because there's a lot of movies about like a bad rich person. But it's in neither of these movies is it one bad rich person or one corrupt company. It's not. Neither of these are bad apple situations.
Right.
I mean, you could argue with the Big Boss. They're like, oh, we're putting it in Thailand. It's over there.
Right.
It's not about us. But like, it's just about what like most of the rest of the world. Then they're not being like this is a thing about Thailand.
Right. Yeah. Like, it's just when this is what it's like out there, on the other side of the wall.
And I'm sure there's like nuances also that like I'm completely missing. So, certainly any listeners, if you have anything to bring to this question in terms of like the Big Boss being a Hong Kong production that was set in Thailand and like what that's all about vis-a-vis these themes, we would love to hear it.
Yeah. And just real quick, Sean and Nicole put together this like sort of collection of scholarly articles and primary resources, and I printed out several of them just to minimize my screen time and distractions. But we're in a pandemic, there's an election coming up, and there's a reckoning that's like a few centuries in the works going on. And I just didn't get to read very much, but I did watch both movies. That's
all you need to do.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I'm just talking just as some dude who has the background that I have, and I don't know everything, and I may have said something that was just inaccurate or dumb, and I look forward to, learning always. You don't have to correct me though if I cause harm to you, because that's not your job. But like someone.
But just everyone in the audience should feel free to tell all of us about how we're wrong if you would like to.
Right. I mean, if we're wrong.
We welcome it. Relatedly. One of the things I like about these movies is how they show the inherent systemic violence of capitalism, but also there's literal violence that happens in both these films, right? On the part of the oppressors and on the part of the workers. I feel, I'm not to speak for both of you, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and think you might not feel that dissimilarly from me, that basically 100% of what might be called violence on the part of any worker in either of these movies is 1000% justified. And if anything, wish there'd been more of it earlier. I feel like both films also really unambiguously portray that kind of what I would call self-defense as a good. And that I think is actually very fucking rare, at least in US cinema, which one of these is not, notably. But like what Boots does, just in showing labor organizing at all, showing Squeeze being like, hey, yeah, this is fucked up. Want to get a drink? And I'm like, yes, that's how shit actually changes in real life. And we never see that dramatized almost.
Yes.
In films. But then also, like further down the road, when it's like, yeah, sometimes you do need an Equisapien to fuck some cops up.
Well, that's
another way that things change.
Yeah.
That's something that I actually wanted to talk about way before that I actually forgot about was one, like, Cash is like really hung up on this idea that he has to become something and he doesn't want to be stuck, and he's like, I mean, look at our high school football team. No, Look at them. And they're right there. Great moment. Very, very Amelie.
Yeah.
In Oakland. But so the whole idea is, these guys, they work at like the Home Depot selling like security systems, and they just like play football all day. And he's just like, what good is that? Like, these guys are nothing. In the climax of the film, he uses their home security system. Like he enlists them, and their security system information helps them to break out the Equisapiens. And when the cops get distracted by artwork in the final, where the Pinkertons are busting up the things, the football players all come out and tackle them. And so not only is that kind of a cool thing where you realize, like, yo, man, like, don't judge. Like, we all have a place in this and we can all use our skills. But I also really like to remind myself that, like, professional sports players in America, majority belong to the black race, if that's a thing, which it's not. They're black people is what I'm trying to say. And they also have a lot of money, and like, we can both metaphorically and literally tackle cops with that. Like, I'm saying, like, are you, do you play for the New York Giants? You could tackle a cop, man. I know you can. You got armor even for your job, from your job. You get it from your job. Also, you have so much money. Like, you could, like, for real. Like, and also, and now I'm just being dumb, but like, like, remember, so now I'm being dumb and also old. Remember when ballers used to, they would get a Hummer, they'd buy a Humvee. Fucking all right. Get some of them shits, get the armor on them, and let's go. Like, come on, guys.
It's actually useful now.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. You don't know. There's white supremacists with guns. Also, there are white supremacists with guns that aren't in the police department. So, like, it's dangerous out there. That said, I really like that moment with the football players.
Yeah.
And because there's definitely like this moment where, like, his bougie sensibilities, he had to like take that back and realize, like, or you could call that like sort of like the house field dichotomy, is sort of, he starts to understand that's not a real thing or whatever. So that's pretty cool.
It's a really constructive film. And it's like, I know, Che, this is something you and I have talked about a lot, but like, there's a lot of anti-capitalist art, or art that otherwise politically I feel an affinity with, that's about critique, right? That's about like, this is fucked up, this is fucked up, this is fucked up, let me show you all the ways things are fucked up, and let me show you how it's going to get even worse. This is one of the few recent examples of something that has an incisive critique of that sort, that is like, okay, here, I'm going to show you how everything's already fucked up right now. You're going to look, that's why everyone's like, no, Sorry to Bother You is a documentary. Like, this isn't even exaggerated. This is just what's going on, aside from maybe the literal Equisapiens. But what do I know? Like, there's a whole lot I don't know right now about what is going on in this country. And so, like, Che talking about, like, blah, 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 and the football players, and this is making me think about all these other real world applications for ways in which, and I would like to think that we are not the only people having such thoughts. And there's something really amazing and exciting about that. And I feel like this film throws down a gauntlet of sorts that's like, I can make my personal vision. This is not a compromised film very much, at least. I'll make my weirdo, like weird in ways other people haven't even thought of, cross-genre, like anti-capitalist, like some of the worst politics for getting a fucking movie made.
Yeah.
And here it is, and I did it, and it's creatively fulfilling, and it's fucking helpful.
Mhm.
It's a bit of a roadmap. It's a little bit of like, okay, this is how it's done. This is how things change. And it's kind of nice that it both, in terms of the content of the film, but also like the film itself existing is another example of that, right?
Right.
Because like
Yeah.
I see this and it's like, well, what excuse do I have to at least not try to do whatever is exactly the film I want to make?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not, what I think Sundance will like.
Right. Well,
Huh.
and again, Detroit, in Sorry to Bother You, Detroit is an artist. And it's convenient, for anytime you got a movie with like a man-child who's stuck in his ways, like if you just get a quirky artist girl in there, then gall darn it, that might. Or alternately, if you got a boring stick in the mud, then like they're gonna have to try to win the like quirky.
Mhm.
So that's dumb. But the point is, she's an artist, and she knows how she wants to express herself. And there's a moment in the film where Cash is like, no, you can't do it like this. Like it's too you're gonna get hurt. It's too vulnerable. It's too dangerous. Like, and she's like, it's part of my art, man. Like it's what I'm doing. And there's something really powerful in that like she literally, in order to do her art as she must do it, she has to literally open herself up to being hit and like abused and sort of like embarrassed. And there's this whole,
She has to make herself vulnerable.
she has to make herself vulnerable. And the other thing that I was thinking about this time, and I feel like I never settled on, is like when she's in the gallery space, she's British,
Mhm.
she's like,
She's got the white voice thing doing.
She's
Yeah.
and so it's
By
like
Lily
she's doing
James? Yeah.
yeah, so she's doing the art world version of the white voice. But then while she's doing her performance, like there's just I'm never sure if she like crosses over in between, if there's a part, if there's like, I'm not, I like it's because the
Yeah.
film doesn't spend quite enough time with her.
Right.
It does suggest that she has a life outside of Cassius,
Mhm.
to be sure, but like I just don't quite, like it hints at it. I don't know that this is a failing, but it is a thing that like I noticed.
Yeah, it doesn't give her a whole lot beyond him. But one of the ways that I read a lot of the gallery stuff is the way in which art has to participate in the same, is forced to participate in the same systems as what Cassius is doing. It's not that different. Which is like a conversation that Nicole and I have plenty about the stuff that we create and getting stuff out there, and and the relative investment of certain types of projects versus other compared to their return, just that sort of selling of, in that space, not selling herself, but selling an idea of the artist,
Right.
in that space with that voice.
Right.
I definitely question this time where the line is
Mhm.
in that scene with her and all of these issues, because obviously like they're drawing a parallel between her and Cassius and the fact that she is also reflecting something back to the audience so she will be able to get money and be successful, and that there's a parallel there. But it's not, I don't think it's like the film suggesting they're just two sides of the same coin. I think it's very clearly, And that's what part of what I like so much about the movie is that they're like, it's nuanced. Maybe none of us are pure. Maybe you can't escape this entirely, but people navigate it and negotiate it in different ways. And it's not that everything's equally bad. And it's interesting though, that it's in that scene where the thing happens that Che points out where Cassius tries to actually stop her amazing performance art where she's quoting from The Last Dragon. And having people pelt stuff at her of symbolic meaning. And that he's just like, understandably, honestly, I empathize with him in that moment of just wanting to protect her because it is hard to watch. It's painful to watch. I kind of get if someone was your very recent ex who you loved having like a reaction of just like, no, but also that's only one thing going on.
Yeah.
In that moment, because he's also being controlling of her, who actually is a lot further along at figuring out how she's going to negotiate these things than he is. But I think probably in part out of his discomfort with his own choices.
Yes.
He's like, no, I'm going to stop you.
Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. No, he's totally He's totally wanting to stop himself in that scene.
Yes.
You know, and again, speaking of mirrors, that scene, of course, holds up a mirror to him. But yeah, no, I also think that that analysis, she is significantly further along in her negotiation of existence in a system which is designed to extract value from her very essence.
It's a shame. It's a shame that she serves the structural role in the script that she does, that you kind of outlined, Che, because that bugged me this time watching it, because I do in so many ways really love that character and think she's a great character who does get to do a bunch of awesome shit. It's just that there is this like kind of, and she's also like his conscience, right? Which is the same as Chow Mei.
Yeah.
Chow Mei is kind of the Detroit of the Big Boss, which sounds ridiculous because Chow Mei has way less to do than Detroit.
Right.
But I was thinking about it before watching it. I was like, she structurally serves the Detroit purpose. And watching Sorry to Bother You after that made it hurt a little more, seeing that with Detroit.
Yeah. She anchors him in like, just like realness.
Yeah, and also like is his goal. Is the prize, and you know, and it's
has to win her back in some way in that video game sort of way.
So let's take a little break from our discussions of capitalism to engage in some capitalism, because it's super fun, and we'll be right back.
Sean, we need to tell people about our Patreon.
I don't feel like it.
Why not? Why would we make one if we didn't want people to see it?
I just think they'll be overwhelmed.
Well, there is a lot of content on our Patreon.
Nicole? A lot of content? We have behind-the-scenes materials, early access to our short films, music videos, and podcasts, updates on current and future projects, video production and social media management training materials, a serialized sci-fi novel, personal writings, access to our award-winning films, small talk and meme, and other exclusive subscriber content. That's not even to mention all the other ideas we have.
Okay, maybe it is a lot.
And it all starts at just $2 a month. How much can people really handle at just $2 per month? And we update weekly. Weekly, Nicole.
Yeah, maybe it's too much to talk about now.
If they really feel motivated, I think it would be great for them to check out patreon.com/4milescircus and subscribe. There's even public posts available so they can get a taste for what we offer. But again, how much can people handle for as little as $2 a month?
I guess they'll just have to decide for themselves by going to patreon.com/4milescircus.
Yes, patreon.com/4, the word mile as in the distance, and circus as in where all the clowns are. all one word, no dashes or underscores.
There is just so much to be seen at patreon.com/4MileCircus.
I'm so overwhelmed thinking about it, I'm going to cry. What a great capitalisms that we just had with that advertisement. So,
Wait, that was still the ad?
Oh man. I just want to say that I'm gonna leave this in the audio version of the podcast right now, is that
Sweet.
People who are getting the video for this episode are getting so much on the Patreon. Like I am almost feel a little bad that we're only like this is the $2 level because it's epic and one of the most entertaining things they're gonna get. I'm like, I want more of your money.
Because you want to become a big boss?
Yeah. I want to be the Chang.
Wow, man.
I don't think I want to become a horse guy. So I think Chang. Also, he had the abs, which I do not have.
He was Bruce Lee.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want to be Bruce Lee.
Vibrating. Just
Exactly.
vibrating.
I wish that man were still alive.
Yo.
Because all this I think I've told both of you, because when John Saxon died, Sean, my husband Sean, not this Sean who's in the other room, was like, let's watch Enter the Dragon. Because let's watch a John Saxon movie. Let's watch that one. And I was like, okay, cool. And we watched it. And I was like, well, now I just want to watch every Bruce Lee thing I can possibly watch.
That's the craziest Trojan horse. It's just like, hey, let's watch a John Saxon movie. Oh, yeah. Which one you want to watch? Oh, I don't know. How about Enter the Dragon? Man.
I was just like, here we go.
Not Battle Beyond the Stars.
That's a fake out. That's a real fake out.
But so Bruce Lee's the best. I think we all agree. We could all talk a lot. There's so much to say just about him and him as a cultural figure in terms of all these things. But we can't give $2 a month patrons that much.
And yet, that is the commitment we've made. So
well,
and boy.
I'm just saying that's why we're gonna have to move on to discuss some of the wrap-up questions they'd like to talk to us about because we can't. I think we've given them so much.
So people out there in the world, we would love for people to join in on the discussion. Either leave us a comment. You can go over to anchor.fm/celluloid mirror and leave like an audio message. You can email us info@4milescircus.com. You can message us 4MileCircus on any of the social medias. Let us know what you think. We've got a couple questions. Either you can talk to us about what we talked about, share your opinion. We'd love to be able to share these on the show in the future as we get them. Maybe we'll do mini episodes or something in between of your input. But a couple questions that we have are, can one reasonably call both of these films?
Your input.
Yeah, your input. Yeah.
Sorry, I've been drinking.
It's also very late.
It's also very late.
I don't know if our viewers know this. But.
It's very late. So we've got, can one reasonably call both of these films anti-capitalist and why? What positions do these films take on violence, political or otherwise? Do these films suggest a path forward to a future with less exploitation? How do each of these films illustrate the intersections of capitalism, racism, and nationalism? And let us know what you think about those questions on the anchor.fm/the celluloid mirror, social media 4 Mile Circus, email us info@4milescircus.com. Go knock on Nicole's door and tell her what you think.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Definitely don't do that.
Don't do that.
Sean, however, loves guests.
Real quick.
He's just a host.
I thought these were questions for us, and I was like, yo, I'm pretty sure that's all we've been talking about for like 2 hours. And by actually, 2 hours, I mean 4 hours.
Pretty close, yeah.
Usually our further questions, like we've touched on it in some capacity, but this time I was looking at it and I'm like, Yeah, tell us what you think. So basically, tell us if you disagree with us, because
Or like what other perspectives do you have on it? Like you disagree, agree, like things that you see in the film that we're not seeing in the film, or just you really excited about agreeing with us. I don't know. It's just nice to hear from other people. We've actually gotten, since recording our second episode, we've gotten some really nice comments back from people that we're figuring out how exactly we're going to deal with that. But we've gotten some really fun comments from people really engaged in this, like, oh, hey, you want to talk about two films but in this way. So
here's what I have to say about it. Here's what I thought. Some of them even leave us reviews.
Why don't you tell them how to find us in various ways and what they should do as well.
About how they should go to anchor.fm/the Celluloid Mirror to subscribe to the Celluloid Mirror on your podcast platform of choice. We got Spotify, we got Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, a bunch more. If you use one of those other ones, maybe tweet at me or something and tell me why. Is there a better podcatcher I should be using? I don't know. I just use Apple Podcasts, but sell me on your method. But most importantly, listen to the Celluloid Mirror on it and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And on your podcast platform of choice, leave us a review. I'm not going to say leave us a 5-star review. Leave us however many stars you like. If you think we are wrong about all these things, you can leave a 1-star review and say they are wrong. We just want engagement. It helps a small podcast like ours get in front of a larger audience. And if you want to listen to every episode early, you can go to patreon.com/4milescircus.
Hey, Che, where can people find your stuff? You got films. We mentioned it. We talked about how great you were at the beginning. Where can people find more about you and your stuff?
Well, right now, the aforementioned film, Civil Warriors, is available on Vimeo. Normally you can rent it. I think it's free until... it's been free all summer. I think it's free until like maybe the end of October or maybe the end of the year. I don't know. Whatever. If as though people are going to like listen to the link that I'm saying instead of just click on it in the show notes, it's vimeo.com/on-demand/Civil Warriors. Yeah, I don't know. You could check out my own website, but you don't have to. It's just my name.com.
No, they have to.
They must.
I'm making
it
a
is
rule.
a requirement.
It's a requirement. CheBroadnax.com. You have to go.
Okay. Also, you can.
This is not a democracy.
You can check me out on Coffee or Ko-Fi or Ko-Fi or whatever. Or you could just hit me up on Venmo. That's the other V. That's the other sort of like baby blue V app. Because like I am accepting reparations. There is sort of a average wealth gap of about $100,000 between a black household and a white household. So my fundraising goal is $100,000. Once I've reached that, then the wealth gap for me, my generation, myself will be closed. And then I will continue to raise funds for my dad, and then just whoever else after that. So yeah, hit me up.
Give Che your money.
I have a Patreon, but there's nothing there, so don't hit me up there. Yeah.
Get some stuff there, and then we will tell our listeners to go there as well.
Also, go to Justice for George NYC on Instagram to check out where actions are happening in New York in the 5 boroughs every day to combat the police state, police brutality, racial capitalism, transphobia, patriarchy, ecocide, all that stuff.
All the terrible things.
All the big bosses.
Go give Che your money. Come give us your praise, and also preferably, your money on Patreon, where you can see so much more of this conversation and see the conversation as well. It's a very special holiday episode is coming up next, where we're going to pair two
holiday classics, really.
With It's a Wonderful Life and The Exorcist. And our guest for that episode is planned to be a young gentleman from the Oeuvre Busters podcast named Liam Billingham. So
Liam Billingham.
Of our previous Batman discussion fame.
Of our previous Batman discussion, which is only truly available in the video form of the podcast. And
I think y'all really want to hear this Batman discussion.
It's a great Batman discussion. So with that, we will see you for the holidays and some head spinning fun. Have a great whatever time of day it is, whatever day of the week it is for you listening to this. You just have a great rest of yours, and we'll talk to you later.
Hopefully, Breonna Taylor will have gotten justice by now. Bye.
I ended up in that hall with yours. There was another girl. She looked like me. Exactly like me.
Can you come with me and choose?
That'll do, baby.
What happens when the story dies? The evil is set free.
I have to return some videotapes.